Hi, I'm Rob with Federal Finance CPE, and today we're going to talk about the recently announced presidential action to create a Bitcoin and digital asset strategic stockpile, and how this might be presented on federal financial statements. And if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe to this channel as we cover interesting topics on a weekly basis. So today we're going to cover the executive action itself. We're going to talk about what forfeited property is. We're going to talk about what stockpiles are, some unique things about reporting cryptocurrency in the federal government, and then a possible way of reporting this. So the first things first is the executive action. This is a new type of stockpile. The president announced on March 6th the creation of a strategic Bitcoin reserve and United States digital asset stockpile. What this policy does, this presidential action does, is it creates a Bitcoin reserve, and then it has a digital asset stockpile for other cryptocurrency digital assets that are not Bitcoin. And it really tells the Secretary of the Treasury what they should do. They're going to administer this custodial fund for these types of assets. Now, it does establish how these assets will be acquired. They're not going to be purchased by the U.S. government, but they will actually acquire them through forfeiture. So if you're not familiar with that process of forfeiture, it really just follows this method right now. Is first the government might seize something from a person, then it could be forfeited, so that it'll get a court order to forfeit that asset. When it's seized, the government does not own that asset. They're just a custodian. When it's forfeited, then the government does own and have title to that asset. So then the next step added to it with this executive action would be moving it to a stockpile. So why does this matter? Well, it matters because digital assets are frankly very new in federal financial reporting. Also, forfeited assets moving to stockpile assets, not very common, as you can imagine. Actually, don't know any cases right now. And then the third thing is just digital assets. They're going to need to be presented on your financial statements and notes. So now moving them over to stockpile, how will that affect the presentation, and what new, if any, note needs to be created? So we're going to talk about that. So first things first is what is forfeited property, right? Well, if you want to find the definition of forfeited property, we're going to use SFFAS 3, which is a statement of federal financial accounting standards, accounting for inventory and related property, because believe it or not, forfeited property rolls up on that balance sheet line. For forfeited property, you're going to commonly see, monetary instruments. There's intangible property. There's real property, such as house, and there's tangible personal property. So you could have cars, you can have jewelry, you can have all sorts of things. You can even have race horses can be forfeited. Now, the next question is, how do you value this? Well, you value forfeited property at market rate at time of forfeiture. And how do you recognize it's an asset upon forfeiture? So, there's actual USSGL account for forfeited assets. You'll record it under there, and you'll actually have it then establishing a deferred revenue for that asset. So now, when you forfeit an asset, you recognize a revenue at time of sale or distribution or transfer. So sometimes assets are used for law enforcement purposes, which is called out in the executive action, or they could be shared with state and local partners. Now, for forfeited property, we only have 3 USSGLs that are dealing with forfeited property. So the first one is, forfeited property held for sale. Second is for donation or use. And the third one is an allowance for your forfeited property. Now, when we talk about the how your forfeited property is going to be valued, I just wanted to show this table, which is really useful, and it is from SFFAS 3. It shows the different types of categories of property and how you're gonna the method of disposition, the value method, which is for everyone more or less is going to be market value, and then you're going to be recognizing it as revenue upon sale. If it's a monetary instrument, it's actually when it's forfeited, right? Because it's monetary, so you get it then. Or when you transfer or distribute it internally. And if you haven't yet had a chance to see how this forfeited assets are actually presented on the financials, they do roll up to the inventory line, but they have a note in the financial statements. So I wanted to just show, even right now we have a digital assets right here. This is actually from the Asset Forfeiture Fund at Seized Asset Deposit Fund for their FY23 annual financial statements. But you can see here, the table shows the various types of forfeited property. You'll see their beginning balances. You have some adjustments, but you have your forfeitures, which are essentially your additions. Then you have your disposals, which are your reductions. And then you have your ending balance. For our digital assets, you can see your balance. So they started off with 58. For about 8.1 million. Ended the year with some more disposals, some more forfeitures, and they ended with about 100. Well, not about. They ended with 136 digital assets valued at $6.7 million at the time of forfeiture. So then the next question for this is, what is a stockpile? Well, a stockpile is a strategic and critical reserve of materials. Usually it's held due to statutory requirements, and it's used for national defense, emergencies, some conservation efforts. They're really not held to be sold in ordinary course of business. How are these valued? They're valued at historical cost or approximate historical cost. As you know, the U.S. government has been around a while, and accounting standards in federal government haven't always been where they're at now. So you might have to approximate if the receipts aren't available. Now, the recognition requirement, this is really like a consumption accounting. So, as you use that asset, you're going to, recognize that asset. Well, you're going to recognize it when you purchase it. And then as you use it, you're going to expense it as an operating expense, right? And there's actually only two USSGLs for stockpiles. You'll see here 1571.00 and 1572.00. Now, these are once again balance sheet inventory along with forfeited property, but they also have a note. So you'll see here, so this is Department of Interior's financial notes from 2023, and you'll see in stockpile, stockpile materials right here. And so Department of Interior has a whole lot of helium for the U.S. government. You see the balance has changed a little bit. They went down. But this is how it would be reported at the historical cost, right, of your helium. So now the next little wrinkle or nuance here is reporting cryptocurrency. Now, like I said, the guidance is pretty recent, so much so as it was last year, right? Technical Bulletin 24-1. It really helped define some of the nuances of cryptocurrency, digital assets. The real thing you need to know when reporting digital assets is it a digital asset or cryptocurrency that's backed by a central bank of another country? So a central bank digital currency. If it is, then if you remember back our categories of forfeited property, it's going to be reported as a monetary instrument. Now, if it's not a central bank digital currency, it's going to be non-monetary property. To help to think of what does that mean? I mean, here's that chart from before. Remember, if it's central bank backed, a monetary instrument. So then you have your market value. You record your revenue once it's actually forfeited. But if it's anything else, then it's going to be this intangible non-monetary property, and you're going to record the value at forfeiture and then recognize it as revenue at sale or transfer. And in our case, because the Bitcoin and the other digital assets are not going to be sold, they're going to be transferred to the stockpile. That's probably when you would record any revenue if it was associated with a value change. So let's talk about the possible reporting flow. Okay, so here's just my 2 cents on how this might look. So we're going to say, let's say we have forfeited property right here, right? This is actually from the Treasury Forfeiture Fund Accountability Report for 24. They don't have a digital asset on here, but let's just say they do. So they would probably be a category here for digital assets. This is forfeited. What we'd be able to see as things, the beginning balance, forfeitures added, disposal, deposit, sales. I think you'd have transfers. So let's say we had 100 Bitcoin that had to be transferred. So we should see the 100, the value of it when it was forfeited, and then it would transfer over and it would go to something similar to this, an inventory footnote for stockpile. So this is once again the Department of Interior note, but I would say, instead of saying helium, we would probably say Bitcoin, and it would have the historic value of that Bitcoin when it was forfeited. I think when you think about the USSGLs, clearly it'll swap from a forfeited asset to a stockpile asset. You'll have to record if there's any revenue associated or a loss potentially with that asset. But when you look at the financial statement lines, this is the crosswalk for inventory. 1541, and then you have 1571. You're gonna net whatever you move. So that's actually shouldn't affect the financial statement lines. So that's my 2 cents. I think you're just going to ultimately see the addition to digital assets as a stockpile, and in Treasury's financial statement, those assets, instead of being sold, they're going to be transferred over. Now there's going to be those exceptions for paying out the victim fund or having official use, but that's what I think is going to see. So actually not too big of a change for federal financial reporting, just potentially some more transactions to be added to the transaction codes on the TFM. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know in the comments if you have anything you want to hear next time. Thanks.